Hello humans! Today I want to talk to you about fairy tales. This is one of my specialist subjects. If you've watched any of my other videos, they've never been about fairy tales, but you may have seen elements or little references to things that may have given you clues that I am kind of into fairy tales and fairy tale retellings that are kind of my jam. So without further ado, let's get into this. This is my recommendations for fairy tale retellings. These are in no particular order because I can't do that. So the first book I wanted to ramble about is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. I read this book reasonably recently, I think it was last year, and it is just beautiful. It's a retelling of The Wild Swans, or sometimes called, I think, The 12 Swans, or there might be a version of it around as well called The 6 Swans. Sometimes the number of brothers and swans varies. Basically, this is a tale about a girl who has 12 brothers, and when their father remarries, his new wife endeavours to get rid of the children. She turns all of the brothers into swans, attempts to remove the daughter by making it so that the father doesn't recognise her anymore, but the daughter escapes, and then this book and this story is based around her journey to get her brothers back, which involves lots of pain and suffering and hardship on her part. I just absolutely adore the original fairy tale, and this book only made me love it even more. This does come with a small warning for rape. There is one scene in it which is potentially a little bit hard to handle if you are sensitive to topics like that. This book in particular does have a very gritty realism at times, but still has that magical element to it. Also, I totally forgot to say, how gorgeous is this edition? It's black, it's matte, it's simple, it's minimalist, it's still got a medievally fairy tale feel. Harper Voyager, can you please bring out the rest of the series in this cover format? Because I want to buy the rest of them and I need to desperately read them, but I don't want to buy an unmatching series. Next is the only book on my list that is set in a modern time period. This is Valiant by Holly Black. It's actually the second in a series, but it works as a standalone. The first and third books in the series follow the same set of characters, but the second book has a cameo from those characters, but is kind of its own story in its own right. It is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and usually I'm not a fan of retellings that are set in the modern world, but Holly Black's books always have kind of an alternative or gothic feel, which obviously speaks to my life, and that might be why they're the only ones set in a modern day world that I can actually kind of get on board with. Holly Black was the first one to introduce me to the sinister side of fairies when I was around, I don't know, 13, 14. I found her book Tithe, which is the first book in this series, and it was the first time that fairies had actually frightened me. This book comes with a trigger warning for drug use. The drug is fictionalised, so in this book it is called Never, but there are injecting scenes. There's a kind of sinister edge to everything that happens in this book, and there's a lot of morally grey elements to Holly Black's stories rather than the kind of the good and the bad. I would absolutely recommend all of Holly Black's work. I would seriously recommend investigating if you're a fan of Sarah J Maas's Throne of Glass or A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I don't know, but I feel like Sarah J Maas may have been inspired by Holly Black's fairies to create her fae. They are very similar, but I've always found Holly Black's to be a bit more brutal, if that were possible. The fairy queen in Holly Black's Tithe is definitely a dead ringer for Amarantha in Sarah J Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses. Next one is my namesake. It is Mermaid, and it is a retelling of The Little Mermaid. I really love this book and this fairy tale because it is so melancholy and sad. This book really does the original story justice. It's incredibly sad, but also very lyrical, very beautiful prose descriptions. I don't think I cried when I was reading it because I don't normally cry at books, but it gave me that really deep, heart-wrenching sadness in my soul, and that's what I want from any retelling of The Little Mermaid. I really want it to get in there and just rip your heart out of your chest, and that is what this book did for me. The other thing that I loved about Mermaid by Carolyn Turgeon, I don't think I've mentioned the author's name yet, is that she gives you the perspective from both the mermaid and the princess who finds the prince when he's washed up on the shore. And I think that's the only time I've ever seen a retelling of The Little Mermaid do that, and I thought it really did justice to both women's stories, and I think that's really important. In quite a few versions of The Little Mermaid you see that the other woman that's taking the prince away from the mermaid is seen as kind of a villainous character. I like to see complexity of character. It just made it even more heartbreaking because you're rooting for both of them, so only one can get their heart's desire. And in a way, in this version, I felt that the prince was the villain for being so oblivious to what was going on in everyone else's emotions around him. Okay, so I know I said that this was in no order, but I think this one is my favourite fairy tale retelling of all. This is Northchild by Edith Patu, and it is probably, out of all the books, the most lyrical, the most beautiful prose, the most engaging world building that I've ever seen in a fairy tale retelling. And I first read this when I was a teenager, and I reread it as an adult, and it's just as good. So Northchild is based on the fairy tale East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is another one of my favourites. It's another girl goes on quest. I can't off the top of my head remember where this book is set. Is it in Russia or Norway or Scandinavia? In my head it's an Inuit type of life. Ah, okay, it's Norway. So this version is based in Norway. I've seen versions based in Russia, but it's always a very cold fairy tale, and a giant polar bear comes to the door one day and takes away a young girl. And what I liked about this version is that they included a piece of folklore. I'm not sure if this is real, I need to look this up. It's that the first gift that a child is given when they're born will tell you what their life will be like, and in this story the first gift that is given, to her parents' dismay, is a pair of boots, which denotes that Rose will be a traveller, and she will go on this quest. And I just thought, oh, that was just such a lovely element to add in. I like long fairy tale retellings because I like the world that they build up around it, and the kind of daily life that they build up. And in this I really felt that they built up the relationship between Rose and the bear. Am I giving too much away? I might be, but if you don't know these fairy tales, then that's your problem. I already knew how this was going to go, and I still loved it. So the next one is, in my colour series, is Ash by Melinda Lowe. Cinderella. Now, spoiler alert here if you want to skip the next 5 seconds. This is the only fairy tale retelling off the top of my head that I can think of that I have read that has LGBT representation in it. I didn't know before I read it, but I saw the relationship building up between the two girls in the story and realised where it was going. I was still surprised when it went there because I've never seen it before. But how great, how great. Yeah, I was made up. And I think it's still a very lyrical book. It's a slow burn. In fact, all the books I've recommended, apart from maybe Holly Black's one, are slow burners, because I love a slow burn. I like to build up a relationship. I like to build up a world. But yeah, I remember enjoying this, and I just remember just being surprised by it, and I wanted to throw it in there for anyone who's looking for LGBT representation but also loves fairy tales, because obviously fairy tales are hetero land. Get on this. So the next book for you is Princess of the Midnight Ball by Jessica Day George. This is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, which is another story that I love. So okay, for the record, there are fairy tales that I don't like, I just don't talk about them. So 12 Dancing Princesses. Love this story because who doesn't want to go to a magical ball and dance all night, every night? And I like the way Jessica Day George, she builds the world in a really traditional fairy tale way, but in a way that's quite gripping. I've also read her series Dragon Skin Slippers, which is an original story but still has that fairy tale vibe, and I would recommend that as well. But yeah, I just wanted to throw her in there because I want to read her other fairy tale retellings, Sun and Moon and Ice and Snow, which is East of the Sun, West of the Moon, see how it measures up to my favourite North Child, and Princess of Glass, which is a retelling of Cinderella. I haven't got to those yet, but I want to, because so far I have read 4 of her books, and I've enjoyed all of them. So, the penultimate fave. Can't really do fairy tale retellings without mentioning Shannon Hale, can we? Yeah. I have read her Book of 1,000 Days as well, and I did enjoy that, but I like the Goose Girl more. I can't really explain why. I thought the world building was better. I think the Book of 1,000 Days I feel like it's aimed at a younger audience, and when I was reading both of them, I was already probably older than the target audience of YA, so I just felt that the themes in this are a little bit more mature, the romance is a bit more mature. If you don't know the story of the Goose Girl already, the premise of this tale is a girl who goes to be married and is tricked by her maid into switching places, and the maid then tries to marry the prince. The princess becomes a goose girl. In this version, the goose girl has the gift of speaking to the wind, and I thought that was a lovely element which added this extra magic system to the story. Great world building again, good complex characters. I've read the next 2 books in this series and they are also great. They kind of deviate away from the fairy tale retelling, and this book totally works as a standalone if you're only interested in the Goose Girl retelling part. But her characters are great, and I think probably the series only carried on because they wanted to explore the side characters more because they were so great. I loved the addition of the magic system in this world, and I think Shannon Hale is a force for good in this universe. So read The Goose Girl. Also, I love this set of covers. And the last book I think also needs a trigger warning for rape. I found some of the scenes in this a lot harder to handle than Daughter of the Forest. So Diskin is based on a Charles Perrault fairy tale, which it says at the beginning of this book is often omitted from collections because it's not really suitable for children because of the themes of rape and incest which open this story. However, so Robin McKinley, I don't really get on that well with her fairy tale retellings or writing in general. I haven't read anything else apart from Beauty, and I tried to read Spindle's End and I couldn't get on with it when I was younger. Maybe I need to give it another go. But I picked this one up anyway because it's based on a more obscure fairy tale, and I'm all about the obscure fairy tales. It was a slow starter and it was hard to get into because it's, you know, tiny writing in a tiny little book. It feels very like old-fashioned. It feels like the kinds of books that I used to read when I was in primary school before, you know, modern publishing started giving you more line spaces and bigger margins and things like that. I did struggle at the beginning, and then somehow, you know, suddenly when it just switches and you're like, no, I'm really, like, I'm swept up, I need to keep reading this, I can't stop. And that's kind of what happened to me with this. The relationship in this between the princess and her dog is so beautiful. In fact, this and Daughter of the Forest both have kind of similarities in that they're both riches to rags stories where they start out as princesses and they quickly fall from grace and have to learn to survive on their own in the forest, make their own way, and be treated quite often quite badly as maids or servants. But both girls take with them their trusty hound from their former life, and it is so beautiful to see that kind of loyal faithfulness. I don't know, I'm a dog person, so maybe this is just a thing for dog people, but it's just heartwarming. There's one scene in this which I've never forgotten, and I read this quite a long time ago. In fact, I can't remember how many years ago I read this, and I've not reread it. But one of the scenes has stuck in my mind so well. There's a scene where the princess is obviously disguised as, I don't know, some kind of skivvy or stable hand, or and she goes to look for work in the castle, and the prince sees that she has a way with dogs, and there's this scene where he gives her one of his hunting litters that has come too soon. The prince is, you know, ready to kind of let them die or drown them to, you know, ease their suffering, and instead he gives her the task of trying to save them. And there's just this beautiful scene where she sits in the barn all night, lying next to these puppies and feeding them using a piece of straw during intervals throughout the night. And I just saw that image, it made my heart hurt. It's so simple, but she did, I don't know, Robin McKinley did a number on me with this, and she just made it so magical. Never really got over that. It also has one of my favourite quotes about dogs in it. It is a much more straightforward thing to be a dog, and a dog's love once given is not reconsidered. And I think that really speaks about the complexity of relationships and trust after the trauma that obviously the protagonist has experienced in her life. There is a little bit of a strange thing that happens plot-wise in the middle where you have to kind of suspend your disbelief, but I guess that is the same in any fairy tale when you have the element of like a fairy godmother or some kind of magical trick that means something can happen that's kind of a leap in terms of reality. If you fancy giving it a go, I found it very memorable, but it's not an easy ride and it's not an easy to get into story. It's not, I wouldn't say this is YA, I'd say this is definitely adult fiction. That's why I'm not really sure who the target audience for this was. I'm surprised it even got published, but I like it. Thanks for watching this video. If you have any recommendations for me, please do comment and let me know, because I love fairy tale retellings. And let me know if you go and read any of these, because I would love to have more people to discuss them with. In fact, I'm really thinking now that this winter I'm going to have to reread all of these. So don't really know how I'm going to manage that, and also meet my Goodreads book challenge, because I'm already like 8 books behind, so we shall see. Yeah, and I hope the light hasn't changed so much that half of this video is unusable, and I'm sorry for any bin lorries that went past me earlier. I kind of noticed them in my periphery. I mean, wait, what do you want me to do about that?